Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I'm using a trip code because the story is long and I don't want anyone to get in the way of me telling it. Pick-related is part of the area where this takes place. The place I will call the Fields. I'm not English, and English is not my first language, not even my second. And some of the terms and names may not be translated too well. It's also not green text, because as I tell the story, I'll add descriptions, afterthoughts, and parentheses to go along so you can better understand what's going on. I live and grew up in a country where folklore is pretty much real, and people genuinely believe in these things. And although I grew up in the city, I still visited my grandparents who live in a very remote place. Suffice to say, there are real ancient places and forests in this place. Remote locations high in the mountains where you can't really get by with anything else other than a helicopter or simply on foot or horse. Around these parts, people or animals get ill, go missing, or even die in what the Western civilized world would call unexplained fashion. But here, it's all normal. There are creatures like the werewolf and Silioi, which is like a woman that sucks the blood of animals or humans. My great-granddad killed one. Time-space anomalies. People going missing for days, weeks, or years and returning as if nothing happened. UFO sightings, trees growing in strange shapes, goat men, crossroads demons, rock giants, and much more. It may be because of the primordial energy still flowing in these virgin parts of the world, unpolluted and untampered. But things like witches. I knew an actual real-life witch, and let me tell you, the folk stories are nowhere near as creepy as reality. Wise women and men, curses, ancient ritual, evil eye, deadly intent are not unheard of. Now don't think magic as in fireballs, but more like bad luck sort of things, or unfortunate accidents, illness, animals dying, etc. I'm sure we all know a few examples. Some of these things were or are investigated by amateurs as well as professionals, but it's really hard to get anything done. Still, there are many pics and vids as well as witness testimonies. Even so, few things go outside our small, remote communities, and the more mainstream happenings are only reported because they happen near large cities. Like I said, for the Western world with their huge cities and urban landscapes, these things are paranormal and unheard of. But here it's all real. Although rare, and a lot of things are only heard of in really remote places where my village is. Just so you get an idea of how remote some of these places are, people don't know what the internet is. Like, they never heard of it. And people still travel in between towns by foot or horses and carriages and don't use cars. And at night you literally hear wolves just on the other side of the door. Okay, the introduction is done, just so you have a clear picture in mind of the environment. By the way, after I told you my story and you wish to know more about the things happening here, or folk stories, or about the monsters in the woods, you can ask freely and I'll answer. A long time ago, I had a very good friend that lived in the village where my grandma also lived. She was my best friend in the entire world, and nothing could tear our friendship apart. I mean, I would literally cry after the holidays were over, and I had to go back home for school and all that. And during the summer vacation, I would go to my grandma from day one and spend all my summer there. She was uneducated because there was no school nearby, and her parents couldn't afford to send her to live in a city for school. Even so, she was smart and witty, in a native sort of way. This village was a very awesome place. A small village atop a hill, surrounded by forests and fields as far as you can see. It was literally just a road and houses one side and the other. No kids were there except for my friend and her family. There were 2 springs nearby, important. One was further away, one was rather close to the village. You only had to go down through the forest in front of my grandma's house, get to the edge of it, and you could see a hole carved into a stone from which cool water poured into a small pond. The water was really, really cold, and I remember we dared each other to see who could keep their hands in water the longest. It was fun times. And since once it got past midday, our grandmothers wouldn't let us out anymore. So we went to that spring to drink water when we were thirsty and didn't want to go home. Anyway, the story begins one day when we were really thirsty after helping my friend gather all the chicken and birds from the road. Since going home to drink water would basically just be my grandma saying, "Stay in the yard, don't go back in the forest, it's late," we decided to go to our spring to wash, drink some water, play, etc. We got to the spring, and the first thing I noticed was that the pond was really dirty with green algae. There were a lot of frogs and bugs, and the spring was dry. No water came out. It was weird because it rarely ever happens, only when there is no rain for weeks at a time, and even then, there is still some water. No problem. We were kids and kind of stupid, and instead of going home and just chill in the yard or play with animals and have a warm meal, we decided to go to the second spring, which was far away from the village. We also didn't tell our parents and grandparents where we went, since my friend kind of just suggested on the spot, "Hey, I don't want to stay in the yard yet, and I'm really thirsty and sweaty. I know, let's go to Garawalta," the name of the second spring. We climbed back to the main road that leads towards another village a few kilometers away. Only that about halfway through, you must leave the road and go through the fields, enter a forest, and on the other side there's the spring. I have many stories about that road between the two villages, but I won't tell them now. Not enough space. Just ask me after if you want to know. We were on our way to the spring, took left, and walked through the fields towards the Crow Forest, the name of that forest where the second spring is. That forest is really creepy again. Lots of stories about it. It was past midday when we decided to go. I think it was about 3 or 4 p.m. even though we had no clock. And by the time we got there, it was starting to get dark, say between 8 and 9 p.m. Keep in mind it was summer, so it was still pretty much day, but that meant it would be night when we got back home. Still, we were kids and stupid and didn't think about it. We got the spring, we washed, we drank a lot of water, we chilled in the shade, and when we saw it's getting late and the sun already set behind the hills, I decided to finally get back home. As expected, we barely got back into the forest towards the fields, and it already went dark. Pick-related, it's the fields, and you can see the edge of the forest through which you get to the spring. We knew our way well, and we quickly got out of the forest. We had to go straight up from the spring, take a left, and then go forward until you get to the fields. Then through the fields, you go straight ahead until you see some trees. There are many trees, but we knew which ones to look after. And then we got to the road. Once at the road, you go right, and you eventually get to the village. It got dark very fast, and we started to panic, and eventually we got lost because the field is a large area. We couldn't see the trees that mark where the road is, so we just wandered around until we heard some barks, and we got scared, ran off, and climbed a tree. After about an hour or so, maybe less, we climbed down and started to run. Eventually, we saw a large tree, and we got towards it. We thought it marked the road. It didn't. And as we got close to it, we heard the barks again, this time nearby. We climbed on it and stayed there for another while until my friend remembered where we were. At the end of the story, I'll speak my mind about what I think actually happened. But for now, let me continue the story. As I was saying, my friend remembered where we were, and apparently an old man named Elisi lived nearby. I never knew this Elisi, but hey, my friend lived there, so whatever. She knows the place better. We climbed down and ran, and soon after we saw Elisi's house. It seemed occupied and had a fence and gate to enter the yard, so we entered. My friend knocked on the door and called Elisi, but no man responded. Instead, there was an old woman who said Elisi is gone tonight and asked what do we want. We told her who we were. My friend said the name of her parents and grandparents, well-known people in the area, and I said the name of my grandparents. This woman asked if we're lost, and we said yes, that we got lost on our way from Garawalta. We heard the barking again, and she told us to get in fast because at night there's no time for 2 little kids to be wandering around, and that the werewolves will eat us. Not a good translation, of course, but here is a common saying here if someone gets lost. The saying goes basically, "May the werewolves not eat you," or something like that. Anyway, we got in and she served us some boiled corn with salt to eat. We went fast to sleep, but then I began to be aware of every sound and movement in the house. I got irrationally annoyed by my friend who also woke up for some reason. We started to argue for no reason, each saying that it's their fault that we got lost, and let me sleep, and get lost and things like that. My friend pushed me, I pushed her, and soon we started to hit each other and scream and yell. My friend grabbed a fork and tried to hit me in the eye, but only got my hair tangled and started to pull. I grabbed a wooden spoon and started to hit her in the head and back. We pretty much smacked each other all night, and we yelled some very cruel and obscene things. Note, we both are from Christian families, and even now as an adult, I almost never swear. But we were like rabid dogs right then. There was barking outside, and we started to blame each other for stupid things like, "You called the dogs here to get me killed and eaten," and things like that. The woman who we thought was Elise's wife never got out to separate us. She just kept on sleeping. It all ended when I yelled, and I quote myself as best as I can, translated into English. "I curse you and all your life. You will never be loved and accepted. You will always live an empty life, and no one will ever love you and protect you." This was coming from a kid's self, so it's pretty disturbing just to think about it. I mean, I was a kid, yet my curse was thus. It's pretty scary to think about that night even now, so many years after. It was like I wasn't myself, and the words coming out of my mouth were not really mine. Immediately after this, my friend calmed down and fell asleep. So did I. The next morning we woke up and the woman was still sleeping. We decided not to wake her up, and since my friend claimed she knew where we were, we left the house. Back on the fields and in daylight, it was clear we got lost pretty badly. After about an hour or more of wandering, we saw the edge of the crow forest, and we heard someone yell something. I didn't understand exactly what, but he, or she, said something about wolves. I got really scared and ran away, leaving my friend behind. I climbed a tree and waited there for maybe half an hour. When I climbed down, I saw my father in the distance running towards me with an axe. He hugged me, grabbed me, and carried me back towards the others. My mom, aunt, some family friends, my friend's parents and uncle. They were all very worried and searched all day and night. When I asked about anyone yelling something about wolves, they said none of them heard anything or yelled anything of the sorts. They already found my friend at that point. She was all bloody but had no bite marks, and she said she just fell down and scraped her knees and elbows. We got back home, washed, ate, and told everyone what happened. They were all surprised to hear about this Elise man, but our grandparents knew someone who lived there. They said they thought he was already dead a long time ago. My grandma also did her ritual prayers and weird folk stuff. She also said that next year she will ask the village witch. She was a very, very old lady in our village who healed and was generally very knowledgeable, to do something. At this point, the story is kind of over. I will only add that the following year we did go to this witch lady and did the thing. She made 2 crowns of certain flowers. I think the English name is bedstraw. One for each of us, my friend and I. Then she did some chanting and praying and threw the flowers over her house. This ritual is common around these parts, but in our particular village, the higher the crown of flowers falls on the house, the more the person will live. In our case, my crown of flowers fell on the house, which is quite normal, meaning I will continue living. But the crown of my friend rolled down the house and fell back on the ground. The witch laughed and pushed us out of her yard, saying this is just old superstitions. My friend cursed this old woman and said some very bad things. Here comes the part where I talk about the things that followed and my analysis of the event. A few days later, my grandpa got restless and went to find Elise in his house because he could swear he was long dead. He found the house, but of course no one was inside. Instead, and this is very disturbing, and was even reported to the police in the nearest town, he did find Elise. Just that Elise was not in the house, he was in the backyard. The corpse seemed only a few days old tops, and his tongue was cut out. The winter following that, my grandpa got very sick and died. A few years later, especially after got more and more into occult and magic, I went to the village witch and asked about the flower crown ritual. She said exactly what I told you here, that the higher the crown on the roof of the house, the higher you will live. And when I asked what about my friend and why did her crown fall down, she said that my friend is already dead. Still, my friend was pretty much alive, if terribly changed. Not days after this happened, we weren't friends anymore. Something pulled us apart. Because of this, I visited the village less and less, no more than a few days a year, just to see my grandma and nothing more. Not only that, we even seemed to hate each other. Something did indeed happen that night, and I'm afraid of even thinking about it. Shortly after that, the witch died too. Like my grandma said, she was one of the last witches, and I believe her. The father of my friend also nearly died, but someone found him in the fields. They said he had his tongue swallowed when they found him, which I can't really imagine how that happened. Thinking back, I think we stumbled upon some sort of evil spirit or demon bound to that spring, and it all started when we saw the spring being dried out. Instead of simply turning back, we decided to go to the other spring, which basically sent us down the road of doom, so to speak. Also, the curse I yelled at my friend backfired. My life became progressively worse after that summer. I started to become bullied at school. My grades were at an all-time low. I've never been in a relationship with anyone ever, and not because I'm ugly or socially inept. I just feel that I existed on a different frequency. Like something changed that night, and basically everything I told it would happen to her backfired onto me. The relationship with my parents dropped. I entered what I call the dark age of my life. Absolutely nothing went right. For a while, I said it's because I was becoming an angsty teenager. But then again, so were all my friends, my sister, schoolmates. Yet only I seemed to be into this deep pool. I did some research and talked with some wise people back in the village, and they all pretty much said it was because I tried to fight back a demon. But since the demon was more powerful than I, the curse backfired. My friend apparently never tried to fight back this demon. Thus she became possessed and lost her soul. Once I learned that, everything seemed to fall into place, since everything we did from the moment we saw the dried-up spring we did at her behest. Thinking back, everything from her suggestion to go to the second spring without telling our parents, to her knowing where Elise lived, to her starting the fight, it all seemed to fall into place. Another thing that got me thinking was, why was she bloody after the siblings found us? She said she fell down and scraped her knees and elbows, which is not impossible. At the time, no one questioned it, of course, but it really got me thinking. Could it be that it was the moment when the demon replaced her physical body or possessed her truly? There was indeed a period of time when we were separated. Another thing, she suddenly became very fat in a short time and stayed fat ever since. It was such a sudden transformation, everyone in the village wondered what happened to her. Kids can get fat during puberty even if they are naturally skinny, but usually lose their weight once they get older. She also started to argue very hard with her parents, to the point where they started to beat each other up. I tell you, something really changed that night. I'm a skeptic at heart. I don't believe videos, pictures, or sometimes even the things I see with my own eyes. But this is something that happened that I can't deny its effect it had on my and my friend's life. The curse is ongoing, and I've since decided to live a pretty secluded life with minimal contact because it never leads to anything good, no matter how much I tried. I've also checked with a psychiatrist, and I'm mentally sound and healthy, physically as well. In my case, aside from the sudden change in my life after that night, nothing really changed. I'm both physically and mentally healthy. I finished high school successfully despite having no friends or acquaintances, joined a high-prestige university, and I'm currently studying architecture. Again, I'm quite a skeptic, and I know that many people go through life with few or no friends, no relationships, no loved ones, but I can pinpoint the moment when it all started, and it had an undeniable effect on both our lives. This is where my story ends. I can say I'm content with my life and can't really complain about anything. But what happens keeps me awake at night sometimes. Next, I'll try to share my thoughts about Elise, his wife, his death, my grandpa's death, the witch's death, and my friend's father's near-death experience. I welcome you to start a discussion about what truly happened and share your opinions. Was it a demon, a curse placed there like a trap for the next person to fall in, the effects of tiredness, or something else? This Elise man was obviously very old, since only the old people, grandparents, great-grandparents, etc., in the village knew him, and of course my friend. In retrospect, I think my friend never knew Elise, and it was simply the demon talking about it or giving her the knowledge of that place, so we could go there since stumbling upon it was unlikely. Then, the woman at Elise's place was his wife, because people knew he had a wife as well, and I really can't imagine anyone else being there. If she was also dead and we saw a ghost or apparition, it had to be his wife, because why would it take the form of another random person we knew nothing about? The disturbing part is that Elise's corpse was right there behind the house. It could have been older than my grandpa thought, or fresher. But the fact is, there was the corpse of Elise behind the house with his tongue cut out, and the wife nowhere to be seen. What I think it was Since I have already decided that this happened because of a demon or evil spirit, is that it, whatever it was, either needed a body, blood, a sacrifice, or something? Possibly it needed young blood after it killed Elise and discovered that whatever it wanted didn't work. Either way, I think we were brought to that place to be killed. If not both of us, then one of us. When it didn't work, me fighting back with the curse, it tried to separate us as a last resort, so it yelled something or caused me to hear things so I could get away from my friend. It could also explain why I started to run and my friend never followed, and why we were so easily separated. Next, my grandpa died exactly the following winter. He died in the hospital due to some liver problem. Then died the witch. I don't know how she died, only that when I visited my grandma next, she just told me the news. What truly scared me was the circumstances of my friend's father's experience. According to the people who found him, he was out in the fields and collapsed. He didn't breathe and had his tongue swallowed. They literally said he had his tongue swallowed. I don't know how that even happened since I have no medical knowledge. My question is, why did he have his tongue swallowed, and why was he in the fields? Was he on his way to Elise's house as well, and something stopped him from discovering something? Or he was on his way back home and something tried to kill him? Nothing was said on the subject afterwards. I only know that it was during the summer. Also, those fields seem haunted. There's pretty much always the smell of decayed flesh and only weird stuff happens around. Many people got lost, some for days or weeks. I mean, I can see how you can get lost at night when it's dark and all, but days or weeks? Something's just not right with that place. Tell me your thoughts. I'll be online pretty much the whole night, so I'll be able to respond to questions and provide feedback. Also, if it's too long to read, then please don't start shitposting. If it's too long and can't be arsed to read a real story that actually happened, and you don't want to provide genuine insight, then please at least leave this thread in peace, okay?
Great story, OP. 9 out of 10 would read again. What general area is this, and could you tell us more folklore? Like about the road you mentioned?
Well, you people ask quite a broad question. The folklore of this place is quite expansive, and it would take me hundreds of posts to cover it. It's a road that binds the two villages of the area together. Pick-related, I made a rough map of the general area in paint. As I said, strange things happen on this road as well, since it goes through literal wilderness. I remember one instance where a man came from the second village, and the trip took a few hours, half a day on foot. He began his trip in the morning at around 8 or 9 a.m. and got to our village at 2 or 3 p.m. 3 days later. Thing is, he thought it's the same day. He seemed really freaked out that 3 days were somewhere lost. He said he would have reached our village sooner, but stopped to talk with a stranger he met. He asked if he had a watch. The stranger said he had, and it was 11 a.m., and when the man looked down, he saw that the stranger had no shoes. He said that's all that happened, and it seems that somehow between the two villages, he wandered for 3 days. He wasn't hungry or thirsty. Yep, it's Eastern Europe. I guess it's kinda obvious after all. I can't talk to my old friend anymore. Not only are we utterly separated, haven't spoken in years, I also moved out and I don't live in that country anymore. I do plan to return, and when I do, I'll spend a few weeks there with fresh knowledge and powers, so to speak. I eventually plan to get to the bottom of this. Last time I heard, she got married. Wouldn't be surprised to return and see she has kids or whatever. I've been wondering, are a demon's or spirit's purposes outside of our knowledge? I mean, if it truly was a demon or spirit, why did it do that? Can a human ever conceive its reasons? What I thought was that perhaps the demon was bound to the spring and it needed virgin blood, as ridiculous as it sounds, I think this is the case, to get free. It tried to use poor Elise's blood and it obviously didn't work, so it got free through my friend's help. I mean, who are we to say demons aren't real, and that psychos, serial killers, people that do unspeakable horrors aren't simply possessed or even completely replaced by a demon or an evil spirit? I'm seriously afraid of the consequences of it being true. If so, then there is no scientific method to prove anything, since all a scientist could see is mentally ill, otherwise physically healthy human beings. Spirituality, the mind, the soul, these things are still beyond our reach and metaphysical. If my friend is truly dead, and her soul has been replaced with that of a demon's. Can any of us say it's not actually true? I believe my instincts, and my instincts tell me that something really did happen to my friend.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.